everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Do you guys want to learn how to build a dope letter structure for pieces like this? And this? Well, that's what we're going to do in today's video. I'm going to walk you guys through the process of building up a letter structure from pretty much nothing, and this works for every single letter. So we're going to be using letter R as an example here, but understand, everything we're talking about and the process that we're talking about applies to every letter, no matter the language. Now, I will have to warn you though, this does require that you are at least a little bit familiar with Graffiti's fundamentals, because we will be adding style to this letter, and if you're more of an amateur, you still haven't learned the fundamentals, then you're going to find this a little bit more difficult to follow along. And if you happen to find this video difficult to follow along with, then be sure to check out our other tutorials on the channel. Now, when we begin, we have our name in mind that we want to go ahead and turn into a piece here. Think about your different basic and variant structures, and think about the ones you'd like to use. Here, I'm going to pick between one of these three different R's. There's plenty more to choose from, but I like these three, so I'm going to choose between them. Here we have three letter structure R's. We have a very basic structure, which is a 3-box R. As you can see, you have the stem on the left-hand side, the bowl, followed by the leg of the R. And our second R is actually a 4-box R, where you have a rounded bowl, you still have the stem on the left-hand side, and then you have a 2-box leg, that being boxes number 3 and 4. And our third letter R continues in much the same way with a 1-box stem. Then you have a triangular bowl this time, which is formed by 2 boxes, and then you have the 1-box leg there. We have our 3 base structures, that's what these are called, and 3 different ways of writing letter R. And we're free to choose whichever one we want. This is going to be the starting place for our more advanced letter. And I think I'm feeling the second one a little bit more. And we're going to go ahead and place this on our lettering chart. Now you'll notice we have our baseline, which is marked with letter B on the bottom, and this is where the bottom of our letters are going to reach. The cap line over at the top, and this is marked by the letter C, where the tops of our letters are going to reach. But then we have the mean line, and this one is especially important, and it actually dictates quite a bit about our letter structure. In this example, you'll notice the mean line divides the stem perfectly in half, or I shouldn't say perfectly, but generally in half. You have the bottom half right here, and then you have the top half as well. Now, what's really important about the stem and its relation to the rest of the letter as well as the mean line is the fact that the bowl is going to connect with half of its structure above the mean line and then half of its structure below the mean line. Now, the reason this is important is because this ensures that you have enough negative space within your closed counter on the top half of your letter, and you have enough negative space on the bottom portion of your letter for your open counter, in this case of the R. For other letters, this will work in much the same way. A lot of letters tend to align things back at the mean line. For example, the letter H and its crossbar, letter B aligns in much the same way, letter P, E, a lot of letters align themselves according to that mean line. Now, when we want to go ahead and build up our bowl, when we want to draw that part of our structure, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we align our basic boxes. And the way we do this is we essentially connect them together based on their vertices. Now, you can obviously connect them on 2 vertices, or you can connect them on 1 vertex. In this case, our stem, the top of it, is horizontal, and our bowl comes out in a horizontal direction. So we're not really going to be able to see where the stem actually connects to the bowl. And you'll notice the bottom line of our bowl does not connect on this vertex. Now, to make the width of the bowl, this is actually really easy, and all we have to do is just look to the width of this stem, as we want to make the 2 proportional and really comparable to one another. It doesn't have to be exact, but as long as they're comparable. Once you have that width, you can actually go and complete your bowl. Now, I want to let you guys know, we're working on a how-to-do throwies book, a sequel to our last book, and you guys are invited to share your work in our newest book. So if you would like to share your throwies, then check out the submission form in the description down below. Let's get back into the black book though and continue this sketch. Now, to begin making the leg of our R, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take the ending points of our bowl, and these are going to become our new starting points, and we're going to connect our basic boxes once again as we've done before. So in this case, the leg of our R is going to connect to each one of the ending points from our bowl. Now, we're going to go in a bit of a diagonal here, and what this is going to allow us to do, it's going to allow us to build a little bit of negative space between the bowl and the leg itself. But not only that, it'll allow the final box of our letter R to come out at an angle as well. That way, where the leg of the R ends lines up similarly to the bowl, and they become proportional as a result of that. This prevents the leg of the R being too tucked in, causing letter name weight issues, or too far out, causing, well, letter name weight and negative space management issues, as well as letter structure issues. As with everything in these tutorials, if you're more advanced, you can certainly find ways to make that work, but that's a little bit much for this video here. So now we have the final box of our letter R that we need to connect. And we're just going to follow the same exact process we've been following, right? So what you're going to see here is that the final leg of the R actually aligns perfectly with the first box. And we end up running into a very similar position as we did with the top of the R, where our bowl connects connected to the stem in such a way where we couldn't really determine where the bowl was connecting, same thing's gonna happen here. So we have the freedom to connect wherever we want, and it's not gonna visually make a difference. As far as the width for your final box, once again, just make it comparable to all the other boxes in your letter, and you should be perfectly fine. Now, if you got a keen eye and you are kind of getting familiar with the basic boxes, you might be thinking to yourself, all right, John, hold up. You said the basic boxes need to connect on their vertices, but some of these only connect on one vertex. How does that work? Why are we not connecting the first box of our leg for the R on just one vertex? Couldn't we do that? And the answer is yes, kinda. If we were to take the leg of the R and we were to slide it down so like that, the top of our leg connected to the bottom of the bowl on that vertex, then what you'd notice is we no longer have a lot of room over our stem, and as a result, the left leg of our R is really short and stunted. It doesn't really hold up the letter all too well, not to mention the fact now we have almost no negative space at the bottom of our R within the open counter, and we have a lot more negative space between the leg of the R and the bowl itself. This is not really the best looking letter, as it distorts the letter structure. So what we can do is we can actually make the bottom line for that first box of the leg more anchored, right? It's something that's not going to really move, and we can adjust that top line instead. And what this will do is it'll thin down the first box for the leg of the R, and that you'll find works perfectly fine. You can also do this the other way around, where you make the top line more anchored and you can adjust the bottom line for the first box of the leg, and that'll also thin the letter down. But what ends up happening is you end up stunting the bowl, and you cut into the bowl's structure when you do that. And you might even have to adjust the bowl. Regardless, that's something you'll have to plan for. Now we're going to take this R that we've drawn, our 4-box R, and we're going to smack it on over so like that it's leaning to the left-hand side just a little bit. And what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to raise the leg of the R. That way it's now off of the baseline. But I want that to go back on the baseline, and one great way to do this is to extend that leg back down. I also want to taper my stem a bit and make the top of the stem thinner and the bottom of the stem thicker. This adds a little bit more dynamic to the letter itself. From there, I want to make sure the top of the bowl stays consistent with the horizontal line for the top of the stem. So we're just going to have those feed right into one another, and that's going to create a little bit of an angle to the top of our bowl since we did lean it over to the left-hand side. So far, nothing too crazy here, nothing out of the ordinary. We're going to put an M right over here in order to mark the mean line. And the reason we want to mark this is because I want to show you guys that even on a slightly stylized letter, the mean line is still cutting our letter in half. Not only that, but our bowl still connects to the stem at about the mean line, with one point of the bowl being connected above the mean line and the other point being connected below the mean line. In this case, it's not quite half and half, and that's perfectly fine. Now, something interesting that might happen with your bowl, it's really common with rounded letters in general, but we'll see it here on the bowl, and that is the fact that the blue areas of our bowl, their thickness is consistent with other areas of our letter. However, this red area is a little bit thicker than other areas of our letters. And this is something that you'll notice on a lot of rounded letters. This happens to be pretty normal. It's natural to have some level of pudginess on one side. This helps to mitigate some of the negative space, and it helps to add weight to specific, very important areas. Now, you can, of course, make the width of your bowl uniform all the way around. That's perfectly fine as well, but that tends to knock things off balance, and you have to know how to control not only letter name weight, but negative space management in order to make that function most of the time. And keep in mind, we're specifically talking about pieces here. Hand styles and throwies don't really suffer from this nearly as much. You can learn all about the negative impacts of negative space and how to work with negative space right here in this chapter. Now, when looking at this R, we can start playing around with different things. We can start playing around with different concepts, different ideas that we might have that will adjust the actual letter structure itself. Because so far, we've only really adjusted the letter positioning, that's one fundamental, the letter structure slightly, very, very slightly, by not only tapering, but also extending the leg of the R, which has various side effects with other fundamentals. But those are really the major things that we've done. But now we want to start messing with the actual structure of the letter and changing the silhouette of that overall. One thing I like to do is I like to look at whether or not I want to start extruding different pieces or whether or not I want to do a serif. Now, an extrusion is when you have something like our bowl, for example, and we continue its trajectory through another part of structure, in this case, the stem. As you can see, the bowl now shoots out to the left past the stem. This means that our extrusion still has to align perfectly with the bowl. Otherwise, we're messing up the structure and it's not staying consistent, and we're implying other things. Now, a serif is just an extra stroke to the ending of a stroke. In this case, a stroke added to the end of our basic boxes. And as a result, it would look a little something like this. The serif still connects to the basic structure in much the same way you would connect structures normally, by connecting to a vertex or both vertices. So we could put a serif at the bottom left or the bottom right leg as well. That'll work just fine. Now, if we happen to extrude the bowl past the stem, well, then this gives us the freedom to extrude the stem past the bowl as well. And I happen to actually like doing that personally. You don't, once again, none of this is stuff you have to do, but this is just what I like to do. So I'm kind of playing around with that idea here. As you can see, when sketching this, I start playing around with the idea of maybe bringing that leg closer into the actual body of the R and then shooting it back out with a serif. I also extruded the top of the R as well, and we're adding a serif to the bottom left of the R. From there, I start playing around with the idea of potentially doing a rounder structure, and we're going to add a rounded serif slash extension to the bottom right of the R. I like rounded structures because they're really good for moving flow throughout the name, but then I get an idea in my head. What if I go ahead and I do something more sharp, right? Something a little bit more angular. I happen to really like a lot of jagged edges in my graffiti, so this time we do what's called a letter distortion. We take the stem of the R and we snap it, kind of like a broken bone, and we turn it into two boxes. Now, I want the second box to align with the bowl where the bowl would connect. That way, we can make that snap look a little bit more organic. We still have that rounded bowl, but we pointed the tip a little bit upwards, kind of like a little swoosh, and we're gonna bring that back in at around the mean line. We're gonna shoot that leg upwards, and then we're gonna shoot it really, really harsh downwards, and we're gonna taper all the while. This is gonna help to build up a lot of energy within that bottom right leg and a lot of weight, and that weight is gonna help compensate not only the left lean, but the extrusion slash serif that we've added to the top left as well. So that leg is really helping the R stay a little bit more grounded, a little bit more solidified, if you will. From there, I like the overall silhouette of the R, and as you can see, we haven't really done anything all that crazy. We have a pretty stylized R. So as we finish up the sketch here, let's kind of review what we've done. All we did was lay out our different base structures, and no matter the letter you're working with, you would lay out the different base structures, or you would think about the different base structures that you want to work with. From there, you would pick the base structure that best suits what you're going for. In this case, I picked a 4-box R. After that, I decided to mess with the letter positioning and the letter structure very slightly in order to build something a little bit more dynamic, but not too far off from where we began. And once we had that down pat, that's when we can begin delving into a little bit more detail. All we did was add a serif, add a couple of extrusions, and we were good to go. Now, if you have our book, you can actually go to the back of the book and you'll see all the variant structures you have access to. All of these flow automatically with one another, so you don't have to really worry about these letters flowing with each other until you start distorting their structure. And after we finalize some of the details, we can go ahead and outline it and we're good to go. In your case, you would do this for each and every single letter in your name, and you try to make sure there's a certain level of cohesion throughout the name. If you guys want to see a video like this of a full name and me breaking it down, then I'd be more than happy to do that for you, but let me know in the comments down below. Now, if you guys want to learn all of graffiti's fundamentals, and you want to learn all of graffiti's variant structures, then pick up our brand new book in the description down below. We have ebooks over on my store and physical copies over on Amazon. Also, if you want the best how to do graffiti tutorials anywhere, feel free to check out this playlist right up here with more graffiti content right down here, and I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.